Hello, everybody. I hope you're well. This is a version of this morning's briefing for the Practice-Based Research Project. Um, I'm going to go through some key points and reprise some of the questions that were asked and try to do this in a shorter video than were you to be watching the whole meeting. So let's give this a go. First of all, I hope you're all okay and that you're finding ways through lockdown to stay in touch with each other and, of course, to keep your projects on the move. What we've tried to do with the assessment is to make everything as close as possible to you putting together the various component parts of the thing that you had envisaged doing for the Verge Festival. And because the projects are very different, it means that it's quite difficult to think that there's going to be a single sort of submission. And we wanted to reflect that in the assessment brief. So the alternative assessment asks you to submit the digital portfolio, and I'll say more about that in a minute. But bear in mind that for some people, for instance, if you were doing a playtext or a film, there'll probably just be one item in that portfolio, which will be a playtext or a video file, and that's okay. That's completely fine. Whereas for other people who maybe were doing an installation with separate screens and sound files, maybe stuff on headphones, perhaps a way in which the audience move through the space, then excuse me, then those are different kinds of projects, of course. And what we envisage is that what you'll be bringing into your portfolio is the component parts that allow us to get a sense of what the project would have been like were it to have been stood up in the festival. So that's the principle. As you know, the deadlines have moved later in accordance with a lot of deadlines across the university, actually. So there's a bit more time with this, but of course that recognises the difficult nature of the circumstances. But it means that you have a bit more time both with the project and then with the critical review. I'll say more about the critical review in a minute as well. So to start with the digital portfolio, you submit this by way of a web page, and we had some questions this morning about that. So as you know, there's a link to the web page briefing, and you need to liaise with Cara Barrett, who's the school's digital administrator, who's helping you to set up your web pages according to your briefing. So the sooner you can connect with Cara, then the easier it will be for her to help you, and to do this as a process as well. She doesn't need to know everything. It doesn't need all to be correct right from the first point, but there is time to build these and to make them reflect your projects in the way that you'd like them to be reflected. So that initial brief, which you access online, so there's a link to access the brief, that lets Cara know, broadly speaking, what kind of materials to expect, some of the principles of setting up the page. And we had a question, can the page in fact have multiple pages? In other words, it might have different sections. For instance, one might be video material, and you might click on that and go down a level or to another page, and there might be 4 video files, for example. That's completely fine. So that kind of thing is possible. So yes to that. We had a question about whether you can work on this page live or whether Cara has to do it all. Of course, it's much better if Cara doesn't have to do it all. Cara's helping you to set it up and can give you access to your page. So if you would like to get your hands dirty and work with the materials online, then that's good. But of course, we recognise that not everybody will be able to do that, either with sufficient experience or perhaps with access issues as well. So Cara can composite these pages with the materials and the briefing that you provide. What about its access by other people? Is it only going to be seen by the examiners, or do we need to worry about it being more publicly available? It will only be seen by the examiners and by anyone else that you involve working on your project. If there's more than one of you, if there are, say, 2 or 3 of you, then of course you can all have access to it, and otherwise the examiners will have access to it, but nobody else will. I'll say a bit more about the point at which we make this work more public in a minute, but where we do, it'll be because you decide to and you agree to it. So when you submit the portfolio for assessment, you don't have to worry about a public seeing it. It will only be available to the examiners. Can you talk this through with Cara by way of the kind of video chat that we had this morning? Yes, you can, but of course you need to be in touch with Cara, and then you make those arrangements with Cara yourself. And will you be judged on the nature of your website design? No, you won't. Partly because Cara may well be doing that, but also because what we're interested in is the website being in some sense a container for the project rather than a website in and of itself. So we're not assessing the website. The website's the vehicle by which you make the materials available to us to understand the project. And the better sense you can give us of how the project could have been, its component parts, how you've realized those where you have done text, video material, choreographic plans, for instance, where you give us that information, then we can see it in the website and we get a really good, clear picture of what the project is. That's really what we're after. Okay, there's going to be a cover sheet that attaches to all assessments this term, which allows you to talk about any issues that you think are relevant in relation to the coronavirus situation. So if you think that the situation has impacted you and affected the way that you work, you can put that on the cover sheet, and then that means that the examiners can have that in mind and can take that into account. Otherwise, there were some questions about the university's safety net, so-called, or the policy of no disadvantage. And that's something that's going to be rolled out by the university across the university. So it's not something that I can brief on at this point, but we'll certainly be looking out for, and we'll obviously be informed by those principles. But what I can say is that we have various kinds of mechanisms in place where really we want to support you as much as we can, and certainly recognise what for all of us are really extraordinary and I think probably completely unprecedented circumstances. So we've obviously created the alternative assessment to give as much leeway as possible for each of you to represent your project in the most appropriate way. That's the first thing. Stay in touch with your supervisor, because your supervisor is there to support you through the whole journey, right through to the submission of the piece. We've obviously added in the mentors, and I completely recommend that you make use of your mentors who will give an external perspective, might raise a couple of things that you hadn't thought about. And even though you're now making projects a bit differently, most of you, from what you'd initially envisaged, the mentor should still be able to give you advice about creative process, the ideas in play, and the kinds of things that you might do were you to be realizing the projects. And some of that can be folded into your digital development. Lucy and I are obviously on hand to provide advice about the module overall and the journey towards the final submissions. So do drop us a line if you have any questions. And then we're also providing support for the digital realization. So if you work that through with Cara in the first instance, but then we can provide support from other colleagues as well. Okay, so that's all that. I'm going to say a few words about the critical review, but I'll be providing more guidance online about this, because I realise that the review has it's not necessarily changed as a piece in and of itself, but the thing that it's reflecting on has changed. So for most of you, you won't be realising the live performance that you'd envisaged, but rather something a bit different. So I'll unpack that a bit in some more guidance in written form online about the review. So I'll do that and email you once that's out. But just to say for the moment that the principles of the review remain the same, that you'll be reflecting upon the starting points of the project, the nature of the inquiry, the thing that you were interested in, the problem, the challenge, the opportunities that you wanted to engage with. Also, the context for the kind of work that you planned to do, and probably will still in some way find yourself doing. Which other companies are making that kind of work? Where's the innovation? Where's the excitement? What might you do that's a bit different, or did you want to explore that gives you a real kind of sense of traction and ownership of this kind of thing? So the review is the place to play that out a bit. What kind of process were you envisaging or was necessary? But also, what kind of process have you actually worked through in pulling your materials together? Where there's a group of you, how did you distribute individual responsibilities, and what did you individually then develop and realize? And then thinking about the project, which will now be the digital submission, in pulling those materials together, what kind of thing have you made? How do you think it sits within the performance ecosystem? How would you want it to be effective for an audience? Do you want to move people, challenge people, give them new insights? Unpack that for us. So I think what the review is asking you to do is to provide the articulation, the analysis, the reasoning that lies behind the project, all of which wouldn't be in the practice that you submitted at the festival in any case. So the review continues to have that function. But as I say, I'll put some more guidance online, so keep an eye out for that. Okay, once the assessments are in, we've been in discussion with colleagues at the Arts Centre about creating a public face to the work and also curating some kind of forum discussion, like a post-show discussion. Depending on how many people want to be involved, we'll finalise the format and how we move forward with that. So we want it, and a couple of you have said that you wanted the work to still have this public-facing aspect. We've decoupled that from the assessment, perhaps for obvious reasons, because we can't guarantee that everyone is going to be in the same position now in terms of making the work live. But if you do want to make your work more publicly available, then let us know. We'll come up with the protocol and permissions for that a bit further down the line. But then we'd love to facilitate that. And colleagues at the Arts Centre will help in connecting the work with programmers, their circuit of friends and collaborators and so forth. And we can make it available to your friends and family and the student body and so forth. And then likewise with the public event, with the forum event, we'll liaise with you about how we put that together. Both of those things are optional. You don't have to do them, you don't have to be involved in them. And once you've submitted your work, then that's that, and you can leave it at that. But if you would like the work to become more available, we can work with you on that. And we could take that decision a bit further down the line if you'd prefer. There was a question about whether we can stand the work up, perhaps next academic session, once we're all back in action, as we hope. We may be able to think about something of that nature, but it would probably have to be on a case-by-case basis. But in any case, as I mentioned today, the department already has a research and development incubation scheme that allows alumni as well as current students to have access to our spaces where that's agreed, where it fits with whatever else is happening in the schedule. So we'd love that to happen, just as a point of principle. So it may be that you could go through that scheme in order to get access to a studio, to film your work, perhaps to do a scratch of the work. I can't make commitments on other people's behalf with effect to what happens from next session onwards. But certainly we want to support you in seeing this work as a platform for your onward development and taking your own creative practice further afield. Okay, I'll stop there, but feel free to drop me a line if there's anything that you think is still unclear, or if you've got particular questions about your own project. Stay in touch with your supervisors, stay safe, stay kind, and we look forward to seeing you and your work over the course of this term. Thanks very much.